but I mean, I think one of the things Encanto did pretty well for me, and we'll get into the plot and everything else for Encanto in a second. But I think one of the things that Encanto did pretty well for me is actually suck me into the world and make me care about some of the people in the film. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch. We'll get into a lot of that, but yeah, let's talk about that. So this is Disney's newest, computer animated feature film. It's I don't know that I would say it's like particularly groundbreaking in terms of the animation, although a lot of the fabric and textures and stuff, I feel like they just continue to make incremental advancements on those kinds of things, and it just constantly always looks kind of fabulous to me at this point. But yeah, basically Encanto is the story of a young girl who is part of a family, the Madrigal family, that every one of them has some kind of magical power that is, I think, essentially bestowed on them by this house. It's kind of like you just kind of have to accept that for whatever reason this took place. Basically, the matriarch of the family, the grandmother, made a wish essentially in a very harrowing moment early in her life, and it generated this sort of magic house that was sort of driven by the magic of this never-ending candle and whatnot, and it bestowed powers on everybody except for Maribel, who was the main character. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of this movie is sort of it's about Maribel struggling with not having powers when everybody else has powers, but also the question of why she didn't get powers and why this is such a big deal for her grandmother, and the family sort of treats her differently than everybody else. And I don't know what Jen and Paul, what were your sort of top level first thoughts on Encanto?
I mean, it was a cute movie. It was very much a Disney movie, and it was enjoyable when I went to the theater to watch it. The only thing is that when I left the movie theater, I kind of left the movie as well.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, it was a perfectly fine movie. I enjoyed it. The music was fine. The animation was great. I mean, you would expect that from Disney movies. You're not going to get anything that looks bad. I think the thing that has stuck with me the most was the short video before the movie.
Yeah,
that hit a different level. I don't know if I don't really want to talk about it, but if you go,
should. Yeah, you should definitely, if you're going to go see Encanto, make sure you don't miss the short. That one's first of all, it takes you back to like very classic Disney because it's 2D, it's hand drawn animation, which you don't see all the time, and it's about a raccoon's family. It's about parenting. Is what it's about, and not passing on bad parenting habits to your kids. I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that was pretty moving. That was pretty excellent short. Encanto, look, there's a lot of things that I liked about Encanto. I think one of the things, we've complained about a whole lot on this series and on this show in particular. I think we've complained a lot about Disney, especially lately, not really understanding morality and not like presenting people as good people, and yet still expecting me to think of them as heroes. And I would point to a movie like Frozen as a classic example of this. I mean, Elsa in Frozen was literally originally written to be the villain of the story, and then they found out that they had a banger of a song, and they decided to flip it around and try to make her the hero. But she is horrible. She does awful stuff to people. She causes tremendous pain and suffering and completely freezes an entire kingdom. She is the villain of that story, and yet we're supposed to be all proud of her because she learned to let it go or whatever. But letting it go is like the deaths of many hundreds of people, which we just sort of gloss over. This movie, I have to just initially commend that, like, I pretty much liked every character in the movie. Everybody was generally good. The villain of the movie, so to speak, is the grandmother, and she's not bad. She just lost sight of what what was important, I think. And she did so for pretty understandable empathetic reasons, as far as I'm concerned. So I think, like, the story itself, I personally, I empathized with quite a bit, and I thought it was a pretty good story. And if I had kids and they were going to rewatch a movie a million times, I would probably prefer that they rewatch this over something like Frozen. I mean, ideally, I'd prefer that they go back to some other Disney movies from, the 90s and probably rewatch those if they're going to do that. But in any case, I enjoyed it for the most part. I actually have bigger problems with the music than anything else. I found most of it to be relatively forgettable. And in fact, I have forgotten most of it at this point. I literally watched it last night. I don't think I could sing or hum any song from it, except perhaps the very first song, which is Maribel. Basically, it's the exposition song where she's introducing her family. And man, everything else in that movie, I just feel like it's pretty forgettable. And I also, I gotta say, I don't love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think a lot of people are very enamored with him because of Hamilton and stuff like that. And by the way, I've liked him as an actor. Speaking of thinking of, like, his Dark Materials, which I mentioned earlier, like, I like him as an actor. I like him as a performer. Some of the music from Hamilton I'm okay with, but a lot of the music in this, it's just completely forgettable for me. And I don't really understand. Like, it's got a lot of his sort of same tropes where he brings in a little bit of, like, pop music and hip hop and stuff like that, sort of merges them with a little bit more classic, kind of musical style, but it's just not great. And also had a problem with the mix. I think a lot of the aspects of the mix of a lot of the songs made it very hard to understand what was going on, especially especially even the first one. I think there was just so much going on. But how did you guys feel about the story itself? Like, or do you guys want to maybe go into a little bit more detail on, Maribel's experience? Jen?
So the story itself, I actually found to be pretty relatable, and it's not necessarily because the writing was super awesome, but just from, like, a personal foible sort of standpoint, I do tend to put a lot of pressure on myself to be everything to everybody, especially in my family. And it's also not the healthiest way to live your life. And I am working on trying to be better about that and to say no when I feel overburdened and things like that. But it is a struggle. And so it was very relatable for me to see that up on the screen. But other than that, I mean, it was fine.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel to a large extent. Like, the thing so let me talk about the plot for a minute. So essentially, I mentioned that sort of the grandmother is the villain of the story, and again, she's not a bad person. It's just that because this magic house and all these powers and everything else came from her trying to protect her little babies in a very tense moment where her husband had just been killed, and it's just she's basically on the run from bandits who are sort of this is weird to me anyway, because, like, there's no clarity on why the town was being overrun by warlords, but whatever. Look, the town that she was living in was taken over by violent thugs, and she has to run away. And in running away, her husband gets killed, and she has to, basically make a wish to protect her 3 little babies. And so that's sort of the driving thing for the grandmother from the beginning is this idea of like protecting the family and keeping everybody safe. And then she just takes it too far, as people sometimes do. You know, she as the house became this protective shield against, you know, the outside world. You know, it became very, very important to her that everybody in the family who got a magical power from the house has to use it and has to be perfect and has to, you know, be everything that they could possibly be. And of course that puts a lot of pressure on everybody. And that's what I think is super relatable about it. I think one of the things that was really interesting to me about the movie in general, and a thing that I actually really liked about the film, is that the sisters and cousins and, you know, aunts and uncles and everything, like, everybody feels that pressure. It's not just Maribel who feels the pressure because she didn't get the power, right? You have every reason to understand why she would feel pressure, because she's the one person who didn't get something. And so she just feels like she's not living up to anybody's expectations. But everybody else feels the same way. And they all feel that way because the grandmother has put so much pressure on everyone. So I enjoyed that. And I think that's a good story aspect. I think there were, you know, a handful of really good moments that sort of dealt with that issue. And I like the fact that the movie had a really clear theme. But yeah, I guess I wish it was a little bit less paint by numbers, you know? I don't know. I guess I kind of feel that way. Paul, what were your is that kind of in line with?
Yeah. I think, I think paint by, it's a little bit better than paint by numbers for me.
That's fair. Maybe I'm being too harsh.
It's we have our star rating, so I don't want to give away my rating, but it's higher for me than I expected going in. What I really appreciated most about this story is that our main character is Maribel, and as you said, she doesn't have a power, and her motivation, it's pretty clear. Like, her way she feels makes sense. We see the whole story through her eyes, but then as we start seeing the cracks in the foundation, the cracks in the house, literal cracks, she actually starts interacting with her family members and her sisters and her aunts and her uncles. And she realizes that they all have superpowers, but they all have their own issues. And I think that is a great message for the time we're in. Is we see, especially with social media and everything like that, we see all these perfect, Instagrammable images for everyone. And we think other people's lives are perfect. They have no issues. And we're the only ones that have this problem. When in fact, even like the perfect sister who literally just makes flowers bloom, she is miserable. And Maribel is so prideful that she can't look past this to love her sister and until, later on in the story. But it's a great message for kids. It's a great message for adults, frankly, that to actually empathize with everyone, because most people are going through something, and not everyone's life is perfect. And even if they're super strong, super beautiful, seemingly perfect, have empathy.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, if kids were going to rewatch a recent Disney movie, I'd kind of rather they rewatch this one than most of the other ones that I've seen lately, for that very reason. I think that is a very good lesson, and I think it's a wonderful thing to remind people of. And I think that Isabella's story, that's the perfect sister that kind of makes flowers bloom, I think is maybe one of the more interesting ones, because what it takes Mirabel actually going to her and finally being a little bit open and realizing that, like, Mirabel basically yells at her and is like, "Oh, you're perfect. Your perfect life. Everything is perfect for you. You've never had any problems." And then finally Isabella breaks down and is like, "What are you talking about? Like, I don't want any of this. I don't want to just do this." And then I think that, while again, I feel like the song itself is a little bit forgettable, the experience of the song that they do together as sisters, and Isabella is sort of breaking free from the sort of perfectly manicured plants and flowers and whatever. She ends up creating a cactus, which is something she didn't know she could even create. And it's something that then kind of sparks this idea of like other things that she could do if she didn't have to feel this pressure. And I think that's just a kind of a wonderful thing.
I really like the way they framed that interaction too. It's when Maribel first realizes she needs to make amends with her sister to heal the house, she immediately starts blaming her sister.
Yeah.
And putting all the blame on her because she's perfect in her eyes. When in reality, the only one that can make the change was herself and take that first step. And gosh, that is perfect. That is exactly what society needs more of, is that more inward looking. What can I do to prepare a relationship, or even maybe not repair relationships, is make another personal connection with another human connection with someone is maybe they're not this evil, or not even evil, just this perfect person. Maybe it's me that's causing the issue. And I thought that was done very well.
I love that sort of Bruno. So this all sort of comes about because of another member of the family, who's Mirabel's uncle, Bruno, who's disappeared. Basically, is sort of a estranged member of the family. The reason he's estranged is because the power that he was given is the power to see the future. And in doing that, in having that power, everybody kept coming to him, asking him to give them their future. And he would predict it accurately, but they'd always ask him for bad things. And then they would blame him when the bad things came true, as if he was causing the terrible things to happen. But all he was saying is, this is what I saw. Right. And they're all coming to him, asking him to, let him know, like, oh, when am I going to die, or what, these kinds of things. And it's, so you empathize with him a lot. But I really, Paul, to your point, I think I really love the idea that, like, when Mirabel is sitting there trying to wrap her brain around the idea that she has to make amends with people, who, by the way, she's not, like, it's not. One of the other things I actually really did like about the film is that none of the relationships are irreparable. None of the relationships are like people. This is not like Scar and Mufasa. They're trying to murder each other. This is just a family that's just not on the same page, basically, and nobody doesn't love each other at the end of the day, but they're all kind of in their own worlds. But Bruno is the one who has to remind her. He's like, no, you're missing the point. Like, you're the one who has to do something about this. You are the one who is in control of whether or not, you go rebuild this relationship. And you're right, Paul. I think that's something that more people need to hear. And I think it's something that our entire society could probably benefit from